1.
Hi, and welcome to the College Application and Essay Workshop. My name is Matt Giza, and I'm the Teen Services Librarian at the Westport Library. Today, we are pleased to bring this workshop in collaboration with the Guidance Department at Staples High School. It is our hope that high school juniors and their families will find this presentation a useful resource as they enter the college application process. Our moderator for today's workshop is Bill Plunkett, Director of Guidance at Staples High School. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Bill and our panelists.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, and on behalf of the Staples Guidance Department and Staples High School staff, welcome to everyone, and we're glad to have you joining us. I'm Bill Plunkett, Director of Guidance at Staples, and also want to thank Matt and the entire staff at the Westport Library. We're really grateful for the partnership that we've developed and the help with putting on this program today. So we know that for some, even in a normal year, the application and essay can feel daunting in the college process, and we understand that. And we hope that it can also be an exciting opportunity as well, even under the circumstances. So as you think about all the work that you've done to this point and the information that's going to be going to colleges on your behalf, this is your chance to add your personality and voice, to highlight what you feel is important and to share in your own words, your experiences, your background, and who you are. So we're very fortunate to have with us today two experts in the field to talk and share their advice. First, Melina Prentakis, Assistant Director of Admissions from Boston University. Melina grew up in Massachusetts outside of Boston. She has a bachelor's degree as well as a master's in higher education administration from Vanderbilt University. She's worked in college admissions for 4 years and has evaluated thousands of applications from high schools across the country and around the world. Melina has visited Staples 3 times. She's currently spending most of her time in quarantine baking and exercising to counteract the things that she's baked. Sebastian Skarba is an Assistant Director of Admissions at Trinity College and is originally from the greater Hartford area. He worked at the College of Holy Cross and the University of New Hampshire after earning his undergraduate degree from Boston College. His primary responsibilities at Trinity involve work with multicultural recruitment and the transfer team. Sebastian also recruits in Colorado, Wyoming, Georgia, Tennessee, and here in Fairfield County. So you're going to hear a lot of great information today. Take good notes and refer back to this program as you get further into the process of actually putting together your application and writing your essay. Use the resources that the Guidance Department provides. Refer to our information on Schoology, school emails, the guidance website, and our planning guide that we have up online as well. In particular, we want to draw your attention to the Common Application and Coalition Application guides that 2 of our counselors produced that can serve as a step-by-step reference in addition to what you're going to hear today. So first, we're going to turn it over to Melina to talk about the application. Sebastian will talk a little bit about the college essay, and then we'll move on to some questions that students submitted and will hopefully guide you in your process. So why don't you take it away, Melina?
Great. Thank you so much, Bill. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be working with the Staples community again. I know this can be a really crazy time to be applying to college, so I'm happy to be here and hopefully provide a little bit of clarity. To start at sort of the most basic level of the college application process, you have to pick an application platform, right? And there are several options to choose from, but it really is whichever one is best for you is the best choice here. When you have worked with your counselors and your parents to figure out the list of colleges that you want to apply to, I recommend just going through, seeing which application platforms those schools accept, and then choosing the one that most of those schools do. The Common App is, of course, the most popular one. There are over 800 schools that accept the Common App. The Coalition application is essentially the same information. The biggest difference is the Coalition application can only be used by schools that are members of the Coalition for College Access, Affordability, and Success. And so those schools have made certain commitments about their graduation rate and financial aid information, but the information on the application itself is essentially the same. And then there are, of course, schools that have their own application platform as well. And if you're applying to a school that only uses its own application platform, then of course you have to use that one. But if you're applying to schools that have their own application and then also accept the Common App or the Coalition app, truly choose whatever is easiest for you to use. Schools don't have preferences. They're prepared to evaluate all the kinds of application platforms that they accept. So choose whichever one is best for you. Schools can do that because most of the Common Application and the Coalition Application all have school-specific sections as well. Some of them just include like some really basic information. The school is just asking, what major do you want to be at that school? Do you have relatives that attended that school? Those kinds of things. But other school supplements will include some short answer questions or some essay questions. One of the most common short answer questions you'll see is, why do you want to go to this school? And my best advice there is just to make sure that you're being specific on that. I know it can be tough right now when you're not able to visit schools, but schools have a lot of great online virtual resources and videos and virtual tours to help you sort of learn more about them in that way. But to zoom out a little bit more, there are obviously tons of parts of the application, and every school is considering applications in a different way. There are some schools that are just looking at academics, others are looking at things beyond academics. I think the thing that every single school is going to look at is your academic record in high school. So that will be your grades, and then oftentimes the rigor of your curriculum, so how hard the classes you're taking are. Standardized test scores has historically also been a big part of evaluating your academics. That obviously looks a little bit different this year, and I'll get to that in a second. And then other things that schools may or may not look at are things like your extracurricular activities, which I'll talk about in a second, your essay, which Sebastian will talk about, short answer questions, letters of recommendation. Some schools will look at interviews or ask you to submit portfolios. And like I said, every school is doing this differently. I think in general, academics tend to be the most important piece, and then different schools will put different amounts of weight on the other pieces. And feel free to reach out to admissions offices if you have questions about what's most important to them in the application process. A lot of schools have information about this on their website or have videos about it. So feel free to look into what each school you're applying to is looking for specifically. So like I said, test scores have historically been a big part of the application process. A lot of schools are going test optional this year, which is great. Your health and safety is the most important thing. We don't want tests being offered when it's not safe for you to take them. And we definitely don't want you worrying about test scores when there are a lot of other things to be worrying about right now. There are some schools that are still requiring test scores, but I want to emphasize that that doesn't mean that they have the same expectations for testing that they've had in the past. Schools that are still requiring test scores know what's going on, and they know that you've had limited chances to take the test or maybe have not been able to take them at all. So don't worry that you'll be compared to the same testing standards that schools have had in the past. And also, if you have not had the opportunity to take the test, feel free to reach out to that school. I'm sure they're happy to work with students on sort of a more case-by-case basis. There are lots of schools who are making tests optional for either this upcoming year or the next several years or forever. If you have taken the test and you have a test score that you're proud of on the SAT or ACT, I still would recommend submitting them. A lot of schools are going test optional for the first time. Steve is one of them. And I can promise you that we have spent hours and hours trying to figure out how we're going to look at applications without test scores. We will spend more hours looking at that, but it can still be a helpful data point if it's one that you have. In general, I think that looking at a school's middle 50% range for testing can be really good guidance about if you should submit your test scores to that school or not. If you have not had the opportunity to take the SAT or ACT, or you took one of the tests and you really don't think that it accurately reflects your academic performance, then leave it out. They're test optional for a reason, and they know that those things are happening. Students have less opportunity to take those tests this year. So if you're applying to a test optional school, you don't have to have qualms about leaving out those test scores. The other thing I said I'd come back to is extracurricular activities. So you get a chart on the Common App or the Coalition application to talk about your extracurriculars. The most important things that we need to know about each of those is what it is and what's the impact of that activity. If it's a common activity, if it's the football team, the chess club, National Honor Society, we know what those things are, so you don't have to spend space explaining those things. But if it is sort of a more uncommon activity, make sure that we know what it is. In the short amount of space that you have, try to explain what that activity is. and the impact that it's had either on you, what the impact the activities had on you, or what impact you've had on others through that activity. So those are both really good things for us to know through the space you have on the extracurricular chart. I know that extracurricular involvement is one of those things that has really been impacted by this pandemic. Schools know that it is essentially impossible to be participating in extracurricular activities right now. So, it's easy for me to say, try not to stress about it too much. Schools know that there will be gaps in extracurricular activities, that the trajectory of your extracurriculars across your 4 years of high school will look different. We'll likely be more open to seeing like independent hobbies on your extracurricular chart. So if you've gotten really into knitting, or you've started riding your bike 10 miles every day during quarantine, feel free to include those kinds of things. But that is not to say that you need to be spending your time in quarantine perfecting a skill or picking up a new hobby to include on your college application. Again, we know that sometimes there will be gaps there, and that is totally okay. There is also an additional information section on most application platforms. This can be a place where if you need a little bit of extra space to explain some of your extracurriculars, or you have a few more that didn't fit on the chart, you can use the additional information section to put that information. I would encourage you to use it really sparingly. It's not a place to write a whole paragraph about each of your extracurriculars. You don't need to have 40 extracurriculars listed, but it can give you a little bit of a buffer if you need a little extra space. It's also a great space to just explain other parts of your application. So if you got a concussion in the 10th grade and that impacted your grades, that's a good thing for us to know. Or if you really wanted to take AP French, but you couldn't because it conflicted with your calculus class, those kinds of things can be helpful for us to know and are good to include in additional information. You can use as few words as you need to explain those things. You don't need to write a whole essay about why you couldn't take AP French. Just a couple sentences letting us know that that happened is good. And something that additional information is not the place where, as I sort of said, is to just write another essay. We only ask you to write one essay for a reason, so don't feel like if you have another essay you like that you can just copy and paste it into that section. A new section this year that has been added to some application platforms is a question specifically about the COVID-19 pandemic. I think it's great that the Common App specifically has added that question. First of all, I think it sort of frees up your essay to talk about other things. If you were thinking about writing your essay about COVID because you felt like you had something to explain, now you have another space for that, so you can write your essay about whatever you want. I think you can assume that we know that every student has a sort of a basic level of impact of this pandemic. We know that everyone has gone to virtual schooling, and that's been a transition to for everyone. We know that we're all stuck at home, those kinds of things. If you don't feel like your sort of pandemic experience has been that different from your classmates, don't feel like you have to write anything in that section. You're absolutely welcome to if you want to tell us about your experience with it, but don't feel obligated to fill out that section. If something happened during this pandemic that was more unique to you, like if you have had to spend a lot of time homeschooling younger siblings, or if you had to pick up more hours at work because your parents were laid off, those kinds of things that maybe impacted your schoolwork more, I would encourage you to include those if you feel comfortable with it. But similar to additional information, you can do it in sort of as few words as possible. You don't have to spend sentences and sentences explaining those things to us. Just share whatever you feel comfortable. And then sort of last but not least, I think the most important thing overall in the application process is just to be sort of honest and authentic. I know it'll be difficult to compare what your college application will look like to what college applications looked like even last year, but you're living in a different world than students were last year. So try not to compare that. You don't have to sort of make up things or bolster things to make your application look different. It is best to just be truly yourself on your college applications. You of course want to put sort of your best foot forward, the best version of yourself, but make sure that it's really about you, and try not to worry too much about what the colleges want to hear. If you put in your application the things that are important to you, then the colleges that think those same things are important will pick up on it, and you'll end up with a list of acceptances of colleges that are a good fit for you.
Great, thank you, Melina. And now turn it over to Sebastian, who's going to talk a little bit about the essay. Go for it.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Bill, for the introduction and for having me on today. So I'm going to get a little bit into the nitty-gritty of the college essay. So I guess in terms of the starting point, I'm going to talk a little bit about why colleges require an essay to begin with. So at least in my mind, when I'm reviewing an essay, two things that I'm looking for when I'm going over this piece of writing is, first and foremost, how well a student can write, and second, any additional information that I can learn about this particular applicant. So in terms of the first point, this really is important to us because writing ability and writing skill is a critical component of college education, regardless of where a student ends up attending school, whether it's domestically in the United States or even globally. We do really want to make sure that a student is prepared in this sense for what in college education will require of them. Second, in terms of the additional information that we can learn about the applicant, it's really an opportunity for a student to tell us just a little bit more about them, fill us in on their story, what they're passionate about, what they would really bring to the table, and how they would contribute to the fabric of our community. Now, in terms of choosing an essay topic, this is really a subjective point. So what I always like to stress is that students really tell us about themselves, tell us a story that is important to them, and that can really just fill us in again on who they are as a person. So college essay topic can be about what a student thinks is important. So that can be about their relationships with their friends or with their family, or either their faith, for example. It can also be about what they're passionate about. So whether that's hobbies or sports teams or any particular interests that they have as well. Or it could even be about anything really in everyday life. So it could be, their passion for knitting or their passion for volleyball. So it really just does depend on that particular student and what they just feel that they could talk well about. And again, it really is an opportunity for a student just to tell us a little bit more about themselves. I have read essays where a student talks about, their best friend and how they've motivated them to excel academically and so on and so forth. And at the end of the piece, I sometimes find myself thinking, well, why didn't that best friend apply to Trinity? So that's, certainly a situation that you don't want to put yourself in. And we do really just want to learn about who you are and how you would contribute. So in terms of the actual writing process, I always like to stress the importance of drafts. So drafts really do allow you to really sort of work out the kinks in your writing piece. So something to keep in mind when you're working through drafts is that too few drafts will really run the risk of having grammatical errors. There could be even sloppy mistakes in there, just basic errors. Whereas too many drafts, you run the risk of your essay feeling overworked or maybe even lifeless. So what I always recommend is maybe having 2 to 3 drafts or so before having a final piece together that you're ready to submit. And in terms of proofreaders, essentially individuals that you're going to ask to review those drafts, I always recommend that students reach out to family members first. So whether that's a parent, mom, dad, could even be friends or siblings, anyone who you can really trust to give you constructive criticism and just honest feedback on your writing piece. It could also be individuals who don't know you as well as your family members. So this can include instructors, teachers that you've had over the years, could even include a coach or just a mentor of any kind, or even an employment supervisor. It could also include, your guidance counselor, really anyone who can just give you, some additional perspective and just some constructive criticism that you can include, as you're working through those drafts. Now, in terms of editing, so once you get closer to that final product, something to keep in mind is really how your essay looks. So what I mean by that is including paragraph breaks. So something that really pops off the page to me when I'm reviewing a college essay is, how the essay flows. So that's not just in terms of, the language and the vocabulary that's used in the piece, but also in terms of how it looks. So when I usually do this workshop, I have a sort of visual to present, but we oftentimes see, just this one big block paragraph essay that is it doesn't necessarily mean that it's hard to read through, but it's hard to look at. And I'm going to be honest that, when we have to work through a particular amount of files in a given day of application review, and I see that block essay, I think to myself, oh boy, it's just a little bit harder to stay on track and to stay focused. So I guess what this comes down to really is just being wary of your reader's eyes and just making sure that, you are including paragraph breaks. You are just being mindful of, the people that are going to be reading your college essay. Now, in terms of the final product, so before you're ready to hit submit on your college application and you're sending that essay in, some questions that you might want to ask yourself are, does it capture your reader's attention? Would you want to keep reading if you were the one reviewing this essay? I mentioned earlier, are you the main character of this story? Did you provide, examples or anecdotes? Did you use descriptive language? So these are all things that you should be asking yourself as you're working through that final draft. And also some basics, such as, did you use proper spelling, punctuation, and grammar? That's a really, really easy one. I often find that students overly rely on, spell check or those tools that you have at your disposal. Something that I advise though is that, again, just reading through it as many times as possible prior to submitting it, because spell check, while it is great, it is not the end all be all, and there are still sometimes embarrassing errors that we find in essays, that have been avoided or overlooked by tools such as that one. So in terms of just wrapping up, again, just making sure that you are being honest, with what you'd like to write about in terms of your topic, and also just writing about a topic that is personal and important to you. Again, just working through a couple of drafts so that you can make sure that it really is your best piece that you're submitting. Recruiting appropriate proofreaders. Again, they could be family members, anyone really that you trust to give you some good feedback. And again, just being mindful of, the importance that the essay has in your file. So for us, as an institution that really does have a holistic and comprehensive review of applications, the college essay really is just that additional piece of information that we can use, when making a decision. So, while it certainly, might not make or break an application or a decision, it is something that is viewed as, again, just an additional piece of information that we can use, when making a decision. So, again, we are going to prioritize, your academics based on your high school transcript, based on your standardized testing, if you do choose to submit that. But pieces such as, your extracurricular involvement list on the Common App, or your college essay, or supplemental essays, are all pieces that still do fit into that puzzle. In terms of supplemental essays, just wrapping up here, at Trinity, we do have an option for a supplemental essay. We do offer students 2 prompts, one of which is around our mission to engage, connect, and transform students, and what that really would mean to a student as a student at the college. The other is around our urban location in Hartford, in the capital of Connecticut, and how a student would really take advantage of that as well. So it really does depend on the school, as to what prompts they're going to offer applicants. But for the most part, just making sure that you are answering the prompt, if there is one. Also just being mindful of, grammatical errors, just basic sentence structure. And I think the only way you can really go wrong in a supplemental or optional essay is, if you're talking about how much you love to attend Trinity, and then you end it with, and this is exactly why I love, Boston College at the very end, which unfortunately does happen very commonly. So please do not be that person, because it is unfortunate. We often see otherwise stellar applications from these individuals. But it's really just those small errors that do sometimes catch our attention and catch our eye as we're working through it.
So thank you both for all that helpful guidance and input. And I think in thinking about the requirements of students as they go through the application process, but also sort of developing that understanding of where you're coming from on the other side of the desk and reviewing those files and having an appreciation for the mindset that you might bring. And I think that's extraordinarily helpful for students as well. So we were able to collect a number of questions from our students that are great, and hopefully won't stump you guys too badly. But so I'm going to put out there a few of them, and hopefully this will help to sort of round out our program here. The first question is, and this is sort of combining a few different ones that came in. Can you talk a little bit about the various deadlines for applications, and especially how that might impact a student's approach to the application and essay process, so that when they might want to start on each of those pieces?
Sure, I can talk about that a little bit. There are several different decision plans that you can choose from. Each school has their own assortment of decision plans. The biggest decision plans that exist are early decision, early action, regular decision, and rolling admissions. Early decision and early action both have earlier timelines. So often those applications are due November 1st, November 15th, somewhere like in the mid-fall time frame. So for those kinds of applications, you definitely want to get started earlier. I think everybody should start their applications earlier. I think the summer is a really great time to be working on those before you're distracted by your classes and all the other things that the first semester of your senior year brings. But especially for those application, not platforms, deadlines, you want to start a little bit earlier. Early decision is a binding decision plan. So you are committing to go to that school if you are admitted. So you want to make sure that that is the school you're 100% sure you want to go to. You want to make sure that school makes sense financially for your family, and make sure that you really, really like that school and you know you're confident that that's where you want to go. Early action is not binding. You're just sort of submitting your application earlier and finding out your decision a little bit earlier, but you'll still have time to choose. Regular decision, you can apply to a number of schools, hear all their decisions back, and then get to choose which one you'd like to attend. And rolling admissions are schools that don't have sort of hard and fast deadlines. They continue to accept applications and often continue to release decisions as well.
And just to add to that as well, so I think one of the most common things that I hear from, college freshmen is, I wish I had started the college search and application process earlier. And I'm sure, Melina, you can attest to that as well as Bill. So I think really just getting that head start when you can, if you can, it can be, the big difference maker. Starting in 8th grade or freshman year is not too early. So some people might get a little intimidated or overwhelmed when they hear us say that, but at least having it on your mind, just realizing that this period of time, this college application process is going to happen at some point for you, and just recognizing that it does get quite hectic, as Melina was saying, especially in the fall of your senior year when deadlines are looming, when responsibilities, might be adding up as well. So just getting that head start and giving yourself that time can really make a big difference in your really enjoyment of the process as well.
Yeah, I would certainly underscore what you guys have both said about starting over the summer. I think for students going into their senior year, especially if you're planning on applying early somewhere, having at least a draft of your main essay done and being prepared with, even if it's not a final list, a well-developed list of schools and a draft of your common application can be a huge victory heading into senior year. And that's something that comes through in the surveys that we send out to our seniors who are graduating every year. Their feedback is either, I'm glad that I started to work on this over the summer, or I wish I had started over the summer. So we certainly don't want students to have their entire summer overtaken by the college process, especially this summer, but carving out some time can be a beneficial thing. Our next question is, how can I write about why I want to go to a specific college without sounding like I'm quoting their website, especially if I may not have been able to visit the campus? So that this may come through in school-specific supplement essays or the rest of the application, or just in communication with an admission officer. And maybe alongside of that, if you guys can talk a little bit about the notion of demonstrated interest, and then maybe like institutional priorities and other things that may be out of a student's control, and how that factors into the application process.
So BU does have this question on our supplement, so I'm happy to touch on it first. Our only supplemental short answer question is, what excites you about attending Boston University? And I hated this question when I was applying to college. I was like, I don't know, I think it's cool, I want to go there, like, I don't know. But I think it's easier than you think to sort of narrow in on like what you think is cool about that school, what excites you about it. You don't have to write like a dissertation about the school. You don't need to know everything about it. But if you did have a chance to visit a school and some story that your tour guide told really resonated with you, you can talk about that. If you have been exploring the school's website and you heard about a campus tradition that they have, and you think that that campus tradition really like showed you what the community is all about at that school, that can be a reason that you want to go to a school. If they have a major that you like that you haven't found anywhere else, or if you connected with a professor, it's oftentimes those like sort of really little things that show us that a student has learned about our school, more so than just sort of like quoting the kinds of majors that you have, or like other just sort of like facts about the school. So if you show us sort of what is important to you about a school, that helps us know what about our school is interesting to you.
So something that I always bring up when talking about demonstrated interest is just that it's an opportunity for you not just to show a school that you'd like to attend and that you're interested, but also just to really be a little bit more reflective about why you're looking at that particular institution, and also just finding out whether it's a good fit for you as well. So doing things such as emailing an admissions counselor, or getting in touch with a current student, even giving the admissions office a call or reaching out to faculty, can all be ways to engage with staff at a particular institution. Whether it's going on a website, or sort of like Melina was saying, just using virtual resources as well. There are plenty, especially now given everything that's going on. Those are all the ways that you can learn about, academic programs, extracurricular opportunities, really how you would take advantage of those resources, if you were to attend that particular school. We do factor it into our review process when we're looking at applications. I know many schools do. It's really just an additional sort of data point, to give us information as to how interested this particular student is, and how likely they would be to attend, if accepted. Because we do want to bring in a class of students that is excited to be at the college, that would contribute, not just in the classroom, but also in other activities as well. So it's really something that I recommend that students really just start doing as early as they can, is just making those connections and keeping the conversation going, not just in the fall of your senior year, but also even in the spring, if any additional questions do come up as well.
That's helpful to hear, and obviously a little bit more challenging in this context, but still possible for students to demonstrate that they've thought seriously about their options, that there are reasons that they're applying to a particular school, and that that is something that they are interested in. Our next question is, what impact, if any, does an intended major have on admissions? And I realize that this might vary at a small liberal arts college versus a larger university. Piggybacking on that, are there ways to sort of highlight academic interests that the students may have so that they get viewed in the application?
So I guess I can start. So at Trinity, as a small liberal arts college, sort of like you were saying, Bill, it's a little different for us than many other schools. And I say that because we're not really divided into, say, like the School of Engineering or the School of Liberal Arts. We're all really just sort of grouped together in terms of our academic offerings. So whether a student is interested in psychology or whether they're interested in economics or history, we'll certainly take that into account, but it won't necessarily impact the way that we were reviewing applications in terms of, a minimum or cutoff GPA or anything in that sense. So that being said, if a student, is interested in a particular department or does have a good sense of what they're passionate about in terms of academics, I certainly encourage them to highlight that throughout their application, whether that's mentioning it in their essay or additional information section, or even emailing us, if they have any particular questions. I always like to, again, see that students are engaged and really sort of putting themselves out there in the process. So really just getting a better sense of what their interests are and what they'd like to pursue in college, is still something that we consider, even though, we don't necessarily have, the schools and things divided up in that sense.
And sort of on the flip side of Sebastian and Trinity, BU has 10 schools and colleges that make up the university, but we actually are also not looking very differently at applications to each of those schools. All of our students have to take classes beyond the school that they're in and the other schools in different departments. So we're looking to admit students to the university as a whole. But there are schools that are looking specifically at what major you applied to and are looking that you showed interest in that. There are schools that, for example, if you are interested in engineering, want to see that not only have you taken calculus and physics, but you've also been in robotics club and done things that showed your interest in engineering or education or whatever major you're interested in outside of school as well. So that's another thing I would encourage you to reach out to schools to figure out whether or not that's something that they're looking at. Like Sebastian was saying, I think it can be great to highlight what you're interested in academically in your application. And it can be more important if a school is looking to admit you to a specific department or major instead of to the university as a whole.
Do you differentiate in terms of the importance of various extracurricular activities? For example, is it more important to participate in any one single activity, sports, academic competitions, music ensembles, things like that? And we always get a lot of questions about doing a lot of different things versus focusing in on one specific area. If you can just comment on that, and sort of what's going through your head as you're looking at a student's activity list on their application.
So I think it's really important just to do the things that you care about. I think nobody has a good time when they're doing something just because they think a college wants them to do it. When I'm looking at an application, I'm not concerned about if you've done sports or performing arts or community service. I just want to see the ways that you've engaged in your community, whatever that looks like for you. So don't feel like you have to sort of fit yourself into certain categories. And this sort of extends to the second part of your question, Bill, of if you should do a lot of different things or just a couple of things. It's based on your interests. If you're interested in a lot of different things, then go for it. If you know exactly what you love and everything that you do is related to that, that's great too. I think colleges are trying to build a community, and that doesn't mean, we want an entire incoming class of all class presidents. That would just be like endless announcements all day forever. So we want students who have done different things, the things that they've been interested in. So really, I think that's more about what you want than what the colleges want.
Just to piggyback off of that, so I think in review, if someone was to look for particular activities in an extracurricular involvement section of an application, I don't think that's a fair or even equitable approach, especially because context varies so much from school to school. One school might be known more for their athletic programs or even their theater department, whereas another might not even offer that at all. So certainly realizing that, again, there are many differences between institutions, not just in the same town, but across states, across countries. And really recognizing that students also have varying interests. So, some might be more inclined to participate in athletics. Others might be more artsy. While someone else might really have significant family responsibilities and might not even be able to get involved in their community in those traditional sort of activities that you might think of. So I think that's always something that's just on my mind when we're reviewing applications, and I know many others feel the same as well.
So we probably have time for one more question, and maybe a two-parter. I think one of the things that students often struggle with in terms of the essay is just where to start and getting off the ground. And once they get into a little bit more of a flow with their topic, I think that, it tends to come a little bit more naturally. But I guess just any advice that you have on how to brainstorm ideas for an essay topic, or what students might be able to do to generate some possibilities. And then if you can each share just maybe one example of sort of a more memorable essay that you've read, through the years, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I think the essay topic can feel like one of the most stressful parts of the application process, but I also think it can be a really fun part. I think when you're trying to think of a topic, a lot of students think that you have to have had this like really life-changing, incredible experience for you to write a good college essay, and that is not the case. I think I would think about the essay almost like an interview. A lot of, there are schools that will have you do an interview and evaluate that, but a lot of schools don't. So if you think of, if you did an interview, what you would want that interviewer to take away. Is it that you're passionate about math and science? Is it that you're a really caring member of your community? Is it that you're the friend that people go to for advice? Is it that you're funny? If you're not funny, don't try to be funny for the first time in your essay, but if you are funny, go for it. So I think just think about like, what is the takeaway about your personality that you want a college admissions officer to have seen and to know, and sort of start there. I have read some really great essays about life-changing experiences, but some of my favorite ones have been about, like a girl wrote about when she spilled a drink on someone when she was waitressing. Or I read one where a girl compared herself to a brownie because it's her favorite dessert, and she wanted to talk about how she is like a brownie. So it really can be just sort of those simple little things that just show us a little bit more about who you are.
So I think for me, it's all about just seeing that personality come through, sort of like Melina was saying, when you're reviewing a college essay. So I think memorable ones for me, one was a student really talking about just walking their dog through their neighborhood, and as basic and rudimentary of a topic as that might sound, they really just were able to tie it back into their family, their background information, really just their goals moving forward, and why a college education is really, at the top of their priority list. So they really did a fantastic job with it. I've also read plenty of essays about food. So like Melina was saying, comparisons between tacos and burritos, or, talking about favorite dessert. Really, it can go on and on. Really, it's just going to come down to what's of interest to you, what you feel that you can write well about, and what you would really just like to share with us, as people who are still human, who are reviewing your application. We're just trying to get a sense of who you are as a person, and really, your goals for the future and your aspirations.
Thank you both. Yeah, I think that advice is spot on. And I think that, there are so many times where we'll be working with students and I see them trying to accomplish so many different things in their essay and write about, all these wonderful things that they've done, which is great. But there's like one specific moment in that essay where I'm like, that's your essay right there. And just boiling it down to something that's simple, that's heartfelt, that represents who they are, I think can really go a long way in augmenting the other things that will come through in the rest of their application. And, the transcript and the scores, if they're there, recommendations, there are other pieces to be able to tell, a different piece of the story. But, this is really the students' chance to show who they are. So thank you both for, all those valuable insights and perspective. And please know too, students, that your counselors are going to be here with you every step of the way, hopefully back at 70 North Ave, and if not, virtually through the college application process next year. We love to read students' essays and help in that process. We love to review students' common applications, coalition applications, just to make sure that everything is set to go. Again, use those guides that we have available to you. There's a lot of really good information that's sort of Staples specific as far as how to label your courses and how to best reflect the Staples clubs, and with all the acronyms and everything that somebody outside of our system may not necessarily understand unless you really go into a little bit more detail about it. So use those guides between now and the end of the school year. Please feel free to reach out to your counselor if You can use any support in getting set up for the summer, access the videos that we have available to you in Schoology and the other resources that we've posted online. And we'll certainly look forward to seeing you back in September and working with you on your essay and your application and preparation for the next stage. So thanks again for joining us, and I'm going to turn it back over to Matt to wrap up.
Well, thank you again to Bill for moderating today's workshop, and to Melina and Sebastian for sharing their insight into the college application process and the essay process. We wish our viewers success throughout the college application process. We know it can be a stressful time, but we hope you find these resources helpful. Today's partnership between the Westport Library and the Staples High School Guidance Department is part of a larger community-wide collaboration fostered by Westport Together. For additional information about Westport Together, please visit westporttogether.org. And please be on the lookout for future programs brought to you by the Westport Library and Staples High School Guidance Department. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.